Alright everyone, thank you for tuning in to the third tutorial in this Blender tutorial series. To this point, we've installed Blender, we've configured our settings, we've gained some insight into the 3D viewport and its surroundings, as well as learned the fundamentals of navigation within the 3D viewport. Before I dive into the tutorial, I'd like to mention that you can save your layout settings so that whenever you start up Blender, it will automatically delete and hide the things we chose to get rid of. To do that, go to File, and go to Defaults, and click Save Startup File. Apologies for not mentioning that sooner. With that out of the way, let's get into arguably Blender's most important mode for modeling, namely Edit Mode. We can access Edit Mode by going to the drop-down at the top of the 3D viewport and clicking Edit Mode. However, it is much more time efficient to get into the habit of using Tab to switch between Object Mode and Edit Mode, as it's something you will be doing many times as you work on a model, so I will press Tab to switch between the two. While Object Mode allows you to create and move objects around, Edit Mode allows you to manipulate the parts that make up those objects. There are three fundamental components to every single 3D object: vertices, edges, and faces. You may notice that while in Edit Mode, there are orange dots, or they may appear in other colors depending on what theme you chose, at the corners of the cube. And so you can see these right here. Bing, bing, bing. They go all around the shape. These dots are known as vertices. If we try to left click on one of those vertices, like so, you will notice that it will deselect the rest of the shape. If we hold down Shift, we can select multiple vertices at once. When we select two vertices in a line, we are also selecting the segment in between those two vertices, known as an edge. If we press 2, we will switch to Edge Select mode. In Edge Select mode, you will notice that the dots marking the vertices will disappear, and that you are able to select edges as opposed to the corners, or vertices. If we wish to return to Vertex Select mode to select our vertices again, we can press 1. Looking back to the edges, if we hold down Shift and select 4 edges on one side, like so, Blender will highlight the face contained within that selection. With that in mind, as you might have guessed, a face is made up of edges. However, a selection like this does not constitute a face because it does not form an enclosed space called an edge loop. A selection like this only has one face, as the extra edges don't form its own edge loop. If we only want to select faces, we can press 3 to enter Face Select mode. As you can see, our extra edge has disappeared from our selection and we are left with just the face. To recap, vertices come together to form edges, and edges come together to form faces. In addition, you can enter Vertex Select mode by pressing 1 while in Edit mode, Edge Select mode by pressing 2 while in Edit mode, and Face Select mode by pressing 3 while in Edit mode. To practice these shortcuts, I'd recommend just navigating around the shape and forming selections of various edges, vertices, and faces. So like this, maybe just kind of going all around here. Also, again, working on our navigation skills. So you can see, you might be able to tell why they might come in handy more now. We can deselect everything by pressing Alt or A. Alternatively, we can go over to Select and hit None up here. Another fun fact, if you are selecting something in Edit mode and you want to zoom in on that, you want to focus your orbit on that as well, you can go ahead and press the period key on your number pad, or if you don't have one, hold the tilde key and press 3. And this works just like in Object mode. Moving right along, let's start moving the shape around. First we'll select our vertex here. Next we'll bring back our left side menu by pressing T. And now we want to select the Move tool, which is this tool right here with the arrows. If you have something selected, you should see the set of arrows appear where your selection is. The red arrow represents the global x-axis, the green arrow represents the global y-axis, and the blue arrow represents the global z-axis. Now we can grab these arrows using the left mouse button to move the vertex in whatever direction we want. As you can see, I can drag out this point as far in either direction on the x-axis as I please. I can make my dragging slower by holding down Shift, and I can also type in a number, both positive and negative, and press Enter to move the vertex a certain distance in that direction. If I pressed 2, for example, hit Enter, or if I press 2 and release the left mouse button, I will move that 2 units 2 meters in Blender. Additionally, we can move the selection in all axes by clicking and dragging from the center circle. If we want to cancel this movement, again, we can right-click. Typically, when I'm not using the snapping tool, which we'll talk about later, I don't move a selection to just a random set of points. So I wouldn't, for example, pick negative 1.027 as my movement. I would choose a round number like negative 1. This makes it easier to reproduce our results and retrace our steps. It makes our modeling cleaner, although small, less rounded movements can add more detail and life to your model. But for now, it's best to stick to more round amounts. But this is something we'll talk about more later. If we happen to move the shape on top of itself like this, and we confirm our selection, you'll notice some visual glitches as we kind of move around the shape here. You'll notice this kind of flashing effect. This is known as Z-fighting, and it occurs when parts of faces are overlapping. So you can see there are parts where overlapping is not taking place and you don't see any Z-fighting, but the parts where there are, you will see Z-fighting. And if we go into face select, this is ugly, right? This is one face, but it looks as if it could be 3. It's a total mess, right? Game engines will hate you for this. Blender will hate you for this. So let's just go ahead and undo that. Another thing you might come across are what are called stretch faces. So if we move, say, this vertex to the center by grabbing right here on the X and grabbing it here on the Y, we're going to create what I'm calling stretched faces. And I've made 2 of them here, actually. They're best seen by looking around your shape. So if you'll notice, this shape, it looks almost as if an edge exists right here. But when we zoom over, there is no edge, right? When we look over here, and again, it almost looks as if this is 2 different faces. If we go into face select mode, you can see that it's 1 and it bends at an angle. Faces should stay flat like this face up here. Notice that all of the points and all of the edges exist on the same kind of plane. But on this one, all of the edges exist, some of the edges exist on separate planes than other edges, and as a result, the face inside of those edges is warped. And this affects lighting in game engines. It looks bad. It's bad modeling. There are ways that we can have things like this and make it look okay. But until we get there, it's best to just avoid things like this. So I'm going to undo that as well. And then also there are these colored boxes. I'm going to center my view real quick. There are these colored boxes around the arrows here. And when you click and drag on them, they will cause the selection to move on every axis except for the one that has the same color as the box. So if I click and drag the green box, the selection will move on every axis except for the y-axis, which is represented by the green arrow. It's worth mentioning as well that there are also shortcuts for the move tool that will save you a lot of time. If you press G, you'll enter into the kind of the move around in any axis kind of state. To lock an axis, like the other movements allow you to do, you would press X to lock to the X, Y to lock to the Y, or Z to lock to the Z. However, you can't press X and then Z, doesn't matter how quick you are, to lock to both of them, like we did with the green square. To do that, you want to press Shift and Y to exclude the Y-axis, which locks it on the X and the Z, and so we get the same effect as moving the green box this way. Again, these shortcuts will speed up your workflow dramatically, so it's good to get into the habit of using them. However, if this stuff has you all turned around, there's nothing wrong with starting off with just the arrows. I would practice making various selections of vertices, edges, and faces and moving them around in many different ways, while at the same time avoiding Z-fighting and face stretching. And so I'm gonna come up with a nice little shape here, maybe a little ramp, a little skateboard ramp maybe. As you can see, it's looking good. No Z-fighting, no awkward face stretching. Yeah, and that's the move tool. By the same token, I guess, we can select it here in object mode. Also, we can use G just like in edit mode. We can also move this around in object mode in the same ways as we could with edit mode. But yeah, we can take our shape and look around at how beautiful it is. we can think about how scary this would be to skateboard on. And that's that. Next time, we're going to be looking at rotating and scaling. So stay tuned for that. Take care.